If you don't follow this stream, I will curse you. Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video, and today we're gonna be going through CN's pooling opinions for our current 1.0 balance units, Alan and Zhu Yuan. And without further ado, let's get into today's content. Subscribe! First unit being Alan. I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys have been familiar with what she has to offer, right? She is pretty much like the mascot girl for ZZZ right now. There's been so many fan art, so many interactions, absolutely insane. Our girlfriend, a very nice, very good character development in terms of presenting when it comes to her. That being said, she is also our Apex DPS, Apex Predator, Gaogura Unleashed, absolute strongest Tier 0 DPS bar none as of version 1.0, not including Zhu Yuan, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later. The accounts with or without Alan is a completely different play experience, very much reminiscent of if your account in 1.0 had or did not have Dilla. It is a very different playing experience, right? And understandably so, right? Because she's our first ever battle unit and they had to find a way to sell this, right? So she is very strong. If you're thinking about pulling for meta, there's no question to be asked, right? She is the only DPS in CN, one of the only DPS in CN that with no other teammates, you can pretty much solo bosses very easily based on the way Alan's kit works. Because she's a self-sufficient unit. She has built-in 50% skill crit damage, 30% ice damage, self-buffs, crit rate, big multipliers, 40 energy on the skill, which is the lowest skill cost in the entire game. Technically, yeah, 40 energy is the lowest skill in the entire game. AoE damage, burst damage, and Sasuga first ever battle, they legit just cramped. Okay, legit is that the dev team, they woke up like, yo guys, what should we give Alan? And someone just said, how about just everything? Oh, okay. Just and they just slapped on together, and that's how we get Alan as of today, right? So obtain flash freeze stacks to enhance basic attacks. Note that there's no cooldown on flash freeze, which means you can infinitely cycle flash freeze with Alan. You use your skill, dodge counters, chain, all the kind of stuff. You stack on flash freeze. You let go of your flash freeze with your enhanced attacks. And because the skill cost is so low at only 40 energy, you can just do it again. She has a pretty much a almost perfect one-man rotation, which is pretty much unheard of in any of our S-rank agent, right? So that's gonna be that. Recommended drive stats engine is gonna be aiming for crit rate / crit damage, and useful dupes is gonna be M1 and M6, right? Then 2-piece woodpecker and 4-piece polar metal, not too much, and deep sea visitor is gonna be the signature weapon. I will be giving a much more in-depth Alan CN unit analysis in the upcoming day. It's just that I'm currently have absolutely no sleep, so I do apologize. I don't have enough time to give you guys a fully in-depth guide. Stay tuned to the next video. Subscribe. We're almost at 100,000 subscribers. Absolutely insane. Now jumping into the verdict. If you are a meta player, you just pull for. Straight up. If you're a meta player, you legit straight up just pull for. Otherwise, it's going to be an 8 out of 10. Not much to expand on. She is legit the most complete DPS that we have as of version 1.0. CN absolutely loves her, and I'm pretty sure every single global tier crafter, they also absolutely love Alan. She's just head above shoulders above all of the other DPS that we have right now. Flawless, pretty much the definition of a flawless kit. But okay, I'll say that later. Also has the best team at the ready with Lycaon and Sogaku in 1.0. No other agents, no other team comps come even close to what Mono Ice team has to offer in version 1.0. But the only thing to consider that she is a 1.0 DPS. And we all know what the flying fuck happened with 1.0 DPS if you guys play Honkai Star Wars, right? Is she gonna be timeless like Scylla? Or is she gonna fly off a goddamn cliff like Jing Yuan? Only time will tell, right? So we actually don't know, because let's just be real, 1.0 DPS or even version 1 DPSs, they are a little more sus because no one knows what's gonna happen 1 year later when we get 2.0, right? So always take that into consideration. A DPS unit, if you are thinking of putting them for future proofness, the only way you future proof a DPS is either through god tier relics, god tier artifacts, god tier drive discs, dupes, signature weapon, basically heavy investments. Heavy investments, right? So if you are not prepared to go above and beyond, for this, then do not expect a DPS unit to be future-proof. It is what it is. If you try to play Scylla right now, with 70% crit rate, 150 crit damage, have fun trying to one-shot a mob. Right, it is what it is. So we have no idea what the end game is going to be like, what the future is going to be like for Zenless Zone 0. But as of right now, version 1.0, Ellen is the strongest 1.0 DPS, bar none. One thing to keep in mind also is her signature weapon, her signature W engine. It is one of the strongest damage boost across any units. Any other alternatives compared to the signature weapon, it is almost a 30% damage drop-off. The reason why is because she has a 25% built-in ice damage and 44% crit rate. That's 88 crit value in a single weapon. I have never seen such... MrPokke has never seen such bullshit in his entire life. 44% crit rate. It is absolutely ridiculous how strong this signature weapon is. And it is night and day for an Ellen with or without signature weapon. If you do get a signature weapon, you can pretty much see one of some really insane godlike crit ratio. I believe someone in CBD3 back then when we had it, someone did like a 90% 300 crit damage Ellen. What? And that was CBD3, which means that Blood didn't even farm for like 10 years. Within the lifespan of CBD3, you can achieve 9300. Which is kind of crazy, right? So take that as you will, and that is gonna be the overall verdict for Ellen. So how the hell are we gonna top this off with Zhu Yuan, our baddie police officer? So what the hell? I'm not even sure if you guys even know what Zhu Yuan does, because you know we never do. But we have already seen her kit in CBD3. Hopefully they don't make some changes in 1.0. But based on her kit in CBD3, she is a shotgun burst DPS. She is also a little bit more reliant on our teammates, but she has a higher potential damage ceiling compared to Ellen. If Ellen was the all-rounder, built in everything, maybe every single thing is A rank, then you can consider Zhu Yuan as maybe S rank for burst damage and overall output, but maybe B rank for some other things, maybe for kind of team counts and kind of overall piloting skills. Right? So that's gonna be that. The mechanics for Zhu Yuan is basically stacking up your shotgun shells like a goddamn American via daze, dodge, skill, or ultimate. Basically entering into suppressive mode and adding on shotgun shells, right? So that is where the majority of her damage is going to come out. She has two modes, assault mode and suppressive mode. Suppressive mode is the one where you use to do the absolute highest possible amount of damage. And this damage potential is incredibly high, but it is tied on these shotgun shells. An American without a gun is like Zhu Yuan without bullets. Okay, I'm just kidding. Anyways, in the early game, there is a potential shortfall for Zhu Yuan, which is not having enough daze multipliers, not having enough impact to trigger our QTE, which is our chain attacks for boss fights. Because if we were to not rely on if we were to not rely on this QTE or impact daze, we pretty much have to rely on her skill as well as the ultimate, both of which it is not very frequent, right? You really want to... The absolute highest burst damage from Zhu Yuan, it will come on when you build a very strong daze, very strong stunner, right? So her power is directly tied to having a good breaker in the future. The stronger your breaker is, the faster you daze an enemy, then the faster Zhu Yuan can shoot out all of her shotgun bullets and do absolute ludicrous amounts of damage. But if your daze is very slow, if it takes you like 10 seconds, 15 seconds to daze an enemy, then the damage burst window also inevitably goes down. Ellen does not suffer from this problem in the sense where Ellen, like I mentioned, she's self-fulfilling, she's self-sustaining, she doesn't give a damn about anything, and she can just let go of damage. Whereas Zhu Yuan is a little bit more relying on the teammates, right? So that's gonna be that. Hopefully, we can get a breaker in the future that is of the same element, hopefully either, or the same faction, right? So that's gonna be that. Recommended drive is still the exact same as Ellen, crit rate, crit damage, same as any DPS. Useful dupes is gonna be M1 and M6, right? Crit rate as well as the 4-piece either chaotic metal, and this is gonna be the signature weapon. So what is the overall verdict for this? Bada boom boom. If you do have a good breaker, it's gonna be a 10 out of 10. And if you do not have a good breaker, which means to say your investment breaker is very shit, it's gonna be an overall 6 out of 10, right? So tell me that between both Ellen and Zhu Yuan releasing in the second half of 1.0 is an absolute genius move played by MiHoYo. Because Zhu Yuan fundamentally as a kid, she's not good for early games. Because in the early game, everyone has dog shit subsets. Everyone has dog shit, so we don't have access to a good impact unit. Especially when our main priority, when we raise the DPS, is gonna be focusing on a DPS instead of impact, right? Don't get your priorities mixed up. So them releasing Zhu Yuan by the second half of 1.0 is a very good, because by the second half, 3 weeks later, you probably would have a decent team build up. You probably would start farming verdicts 3 weeks later, right? So that's where you will start to have access to a better days unit, and that's gonna be where Zhu Yuan's performance really starts to shine. Like I mentioned, damage is directly tied to having more days triggers. So more stun units released or more stronger stun units that we have, it will inevitably increase Zhu Yuan's damage prospect. Other than Nicole for Zhu Yuan right now, we have no other Ether units. So Nicole is pretty much gonna be the best because we have 25% Ether damage buff as well as the 20% defense now. But is Nicole the absolute best for Zhu Yuan? That is gonna be depending on the players, because we also need to have a good days unit. The support unit for Zhu Yuan is not the main priority. The priority is for Zhu Yuan to secure a very, very good break unit, which we might not have because Lycaon, Wolf guy, he pairs much better with Alan compared to Zhu Yuan because he has a ice rest penetration for 30 seconds. I'll get into that in our S rank unit review, but that's gonna be that. So Zhu Yuan is kind of lacking the pieces to make her absolutely insane. And if we were to compare both units, Ellen is a proactive DPS that she can just do things by her own. She doesn't need to wait for anybody, right? She just get up, oh, let's get shit done, run herself, boom, 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 consider that. Whereas Zhu Yuan is a reactive DPS because she reacts based on our team's breaker, whether that breaker is strong enough to whether increase our Zhu Yuan's overall damage, right? So that's gonna be that. And whether we need Zhu Yuan's higher potential damage, because let's be real, if we have a excellent breaker, then Zhu Yuan's damage ceiling will supersede Ellen, right? Whether we need that in the future element, that is gonna be based on our future content. So the point here is this: if you care about the early game, having the absolute best start to your early game experience in Xenosaga Zero, whether you're a whale, whether you're free to play, whether you're a beginner, whatever, the most comfortable, smooth playing experience that you're gonna be able to get, you'll find it with Ellen. If you care about building a future unit that has incredible days values, then Zhu Yuan is gonna be absolutely excellent. So this future outlook, I really love this methodology provided by this CN community, right? Overall, Ellen will have the most impact on the new players' account in Xenosaga Zero and Xenosaga because of this very important thing right here. You will only ever have one early game in your lifetime. And I think this is a very, very good point. Once the early game is over and you transition towards the end game, the reliance on having a top tier DPS, it may not be as important anymore. Because you can see from Honkai Starbucks and Genshin Impact, by the time you reach the mid game or end game, you can quite literally run most, like even 4-star units, you can make them work. You can make them clear end game content, because by then, by your mid game and end game, your investments will be high. You have good tracers, you have good weapons, you have good relics, you have good levels. All these factors ties in so that having a tier 0 DPS by mid game and end game is much less important than having a tier 0 DPS in the early game. Because guess what? Early game in a gacha game, resource is the biggest limiting factor. You do not have access to good relics or whatever, but that's when Ellen starts to shine, because she has such a self-fulfilling kit that it will absolutely give you the best value to push through the content as much as you can in the early game, right? So that is going to be one very, very interesting point that you guys can consider. So in terms of foresight, like future outlook, 1 year later down the road, let's be real, a DPS unit, they probably won't do as much in the grand scheme of things. But in the early game, you can only ever have one early game in your entire life. And it's not like an early game experience does not exist. Heck, have you guys seen the amount of players quitting Xenosaga Zero because of a quote-unquote shitty early game experience? So early game experience, it absolutely does matter, especially for a casual player base. So Ellen, especially for characters that are finding Xenosaga too difficult, especially when you start to try shield defense or Holo Zero, when you start to feel the difficulty ramping up, Ellen will be the savior, and it helps new players, casuals, a lot when it comes to their progression in Xenosaga Zero. Zhu Yuan, she does have a potential higher damage ceiling, but by the point where we reach Zhu Yuan's banner, second out 1.0 or going to 1.1, players will also have access to more resources and levels to make their other DPS stronger. the inherent value offered by Zhu Yuan, it will always be lower because by the middle of 1.0, we are not really in the early game anymore. We are transitioning towards more resources to build more teams and more teammates. So let's just say you didn't pull for Alan and you are waiting for Zhu Yuan. And in the meantime, you decide to build your main DPS. You decide to build your Nico Mata. You decide to build your Soldier 11. So by the time you reach the mid game or like second half of 1.0, your Nico Mata and Soldier 11 is like super well raised. They're level 80, weapons, tracers maxed out. The opportunity cost for a well raised Soldier 11 and Nico Mata between getting a brand new DPS like Zhu Yuan is really not that significant compared to in the early game, we have absolutely nothing and then you get an Alan. I hope chat kind of understands the point that I'm trying to illustrate here. The opportunity cost in the early game value, it is only going to be happening once. So if you care about that, then this is going to be answered. If you don't care about that, if you care about the long game, then it frankly does not matter. Just pick the one that you want to be your wife, right? Also remember your actual account playing experience, the Shogun, the feeling, it will always remain the most important criteria for any unit in ZZZ, regardless of their theoretical damage output, and this will vary between players, right? So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. But with that, we have come to the end of CN's polling opinion for Alan and Zhu Yuan. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Feel free to love. We're almost at 100,000 subscribers. I've not slept. Begging. How's the chat for a streamer? How's the chat for YouTuber, right? Join Discord at discord.gg for Pokke video with vertical community on server and all the best for Alan Pools, all the best for Zhu Yuan Pools, and I'll see you guys next time.